The whole essence of grace is that it's undeserved. We're unworthy of it. So how can we ever obey Paul's command to live a life worthy of the gospel of Christ? In verse 27 of the first chapter of Philippians, Paul writes, "Only let your manner of life be worthy of the gospel of Christ." Now, when I explain things, often I like to start with what doesn't it mean? And there's definitely places in the Bible that are very clear that tell us this doesn't mean we have to be worthy of hearing the gospel in the first place, or certainly worthy of being saved by it. That we have to earn our salvation in any way. No, the Bible makes it clear salvation is by grace, this undeserved gift of God through faith. Well, also realize Paul is writing to people who are Christians. They've already been saved by grace. And so he tells them, live a life then that's worthy of what? Well, it's worthy of someone who has experienced what we have. I've experienced the fact that the God of the universe created me to have a relationship with me. Live a life worthy of that. It didn't stop there though. I've experienced the fact that I willfully sinned against that God. Even though He did so much for me, I chose to rebel against Him. And then live a life worthy of the fact that His response to that was, I still want a relationship. I want to do what it takes to make that relationship possible again, even at the cost of His own Son. And then live a life worthy of the fact that I can receive that salvation absolutely free, by grace, through faith. That's what the Christian life is supposed to look like, just what you'd expect it to look like in light of what it is, in light of what it is like. This is clearly important because Paul says something similar in two different passages. In Ephesians 4:1, he says, "I therefore urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called." You don't have to earn it, but worthy of what you have been called to. Colossians 2:6, "Therefore, as you receive Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk in Him." You received Him as Lord, as the God who wants to have a relationship and everything He's done will continue to live a life that reflects that. We always talk about that saying, I mentioned it a while ago, what would Jesus do? How about another variation of that? What should I do in light of what Jesus did? I'm not even going to try to figure out the letters for that one. But the whole point is that I often think of it this way. If someone were reading this story, about what for us is the story of God and His interaction with mankind. If someone were reading a novel about, okay, there's a divine being who created creatures to have a loving relationship, to bless them, and they were to worship Him, and they rebelled, and He chose to restore it at great cost to Himself and offered it freely. If you were reading that, how would you expect those creatures who've received that restored relationship, how would you expect them to act, to live? That's what our life should be like. Now, it doesn't mean in any way that earns salvation. It's just what we should do in light of salvation. But I know it's difficult to separate those sometimes. Think about it. In what ways is it difficult to maintain that balance between living a life worthy of the gospel and not thinking my life makes me worthy of the gospel and grace and salvation? What do I do? What do you do to maintain that balance? What ways do you see I can creep into thinking I earned it? And how do I guard against that? And then also this idea of living in light of what Jesus has done. Are you facing a situation right now where chances are we know what we should be doing, but it's hard to live out God's will and live according to His principles? How does it help to think about, all right, what should I do in light of what Jesus did? Not just the what, but then the how. How do I live that out? Jesus has done this for me. Does that help in some way? It does me when I think about it. All He's done for me, and it's not to earn it or pay it back. It's just like, God, I want to. I want to live out your principles as tough as it might be. Take what Paul says here, put it into practice specifically in your life.